Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Lexa Peterson, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Private Anne Collishaw. Today, the 29th of May, we mark the International Day of United Nations Peacekeepers. Australia made its first peacekeeping deployment in 1947, and since then, not a day has passed without an Australian peacekeeper serving in the field. Australian peacekeepers have served in a wide range of roles across the globe and have contributed to more than 60 international peacekeeping operations. Royal Australian Air Force helicopters operated in the Sinai as Egypt and Israel ended 3 decades of hostilities. Australian personnel took part in a British Commonwealth operation with Zimbabwe when Zimbabwe won its independence, and a large Australian contingent assisted a UN operation in Namibia. Royal Australian Navy ships enforced sanctions against Iraq before and after the Gulf War, and Australian peacekeepers have seen service in Somalia, Cambodia, Rwanda, Bougainville and East Timor. Today, we pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament flowers of the forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Captain Robert Howard Henderson. Rupert Henderson was born on the 10th of December 1892 in the Melbourne suburb of Hawthorn, one of 6 children born to auctioneer and estate agent George Henderson and his wife Jessie. Rupert received his education at Trinity Grammar School, where he was an active member of the junior and senior cadets. After leaving school, Rupert continued serving in the Citizens' Forces, becoming captain in the 60th Regiment. When the First World War broke out in 1914, he was living in Melbourne and working as an estate agent in his father's business, G.G. Henderson's and Sons, auctioneers. Rupert Henderson was quick to volunteer for the Australian Imperial Force, enlisting on the 25th of September 1914. He applied for a commission and was appointed captain before joining his brother Alan in the 7th Battalion. After a short period of training, the brothers embarked on active service, departing Melbourne on the troop ship Hororata in October 1914. After a long journey at sea, Captain Henderson disembarked in Egypt on the 2nd of December. He spent Christmas and New Year's in camp as his unit continued training. On the 25th of April 1915, Henderson and his men rowed ashore at Gallipoli, making the beach just after sunrise. Coming under heavy fire from enemy positions on the high ground, Henderson's unit soon became mixed in with others attacking up the cliffs. Fighting their way towards Fisherman's Hut, the men encountered scores of enemy entrenched on a knoll who cut the Australians down in waves with rifle and machine gun fire. Pinned down and unable to advance, heavy fighting took place until the enemy retreated and the men of the 7th Battalion were able to occupy their trenches. After fighting off a counterattack, the battalion was finally able to establish its position on the peninsula. This came at the cost of some 400 casualties. Among their number was Henderson's younger brother Alan, who died of his wounds on board a hospital ship in the days after the landing. Having survived the landings, Rupert Henderson and his men were transferred from Anzac to Cape Helles to assist British and French units to capture the heights of Akibaba. The 7th Battalion was brought ashore on the 6th of May 1915 and began preparing for an attack on the village of Koraitha. The attack began after 5 p.m. on the 8th of May, with the Australian forces leading the advance over the open ground. Though they came under increasingly heavy rifle and artillery fire, Henderson and his men pressed on, with Australian units covering some 500 metres before mounting casualties forced them to a halt, 2 kilometres away from Karratha. The hour-long advance achieved almost nothing, but cost the 2nd Brigade alone more than 1,000 casualties. Among the dead was Captain Rupert Henderson. The Minister for Defence, Senator George Pearce, wrote to the Henderson family, who had loss of 2 sons within less than 1 month. It must indeed be hard to have to bear this further trial, but one consolation, however, remains, that your 2 sons have given their lives for King and Empire. Captain Rupert Henderson was 22 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Captain Rupert Howard Henderson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.